In the depths of the ocean, there we have a kingdom. The water is a mirror. I cannot see the bottom, yet I feel ashamed, for the bottom can see me clearly.
Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. And today we are reviewing another watch from Orient. Yes, it has been a while. Orients have featured heavily on the channel, especially in the early days. But of course, we had to return to take a look at this handsome beast in blue. This is the Orient Triton. I will leave the the reference number in the corner of the screen. It is ridiculously long. Oh, I better get wristwatch checked just out of the way first. I am wearing my Benrus 1970 field watch, worn in Vietnam. Incredible piece of history. This is the sterile dial mil-spec version, and rather fittingly I've put it on the Valor strap for a specific reason. Well, obviously because the Valor strap was inspired by my ancestors. The red crimson there is from the red of the Victoria Cross ribbon. My great uncle earned in the field of conflict in World War One, but in honor I designed this NATO strap. And of course Wrist County Watch Club have reissued, because it completely sold out. It was a big success. And I don't think it's going to carry Urban Gentry. I think the next generation is slightly different, but of course the same color scheme. Yeah, because of the military provenance and historicity of this piece, obviously I had to put it on the Valor strap. So a little bit of England and a little bit of American horology on the wrist. Quick shout out to Mark at Long Island Watches, who has very graciously lent this in. It sounds a bit like the old days, the good old days, but yeah. Okay, let's just get a little bit of history out of the way first. If you're not familiar with Orient Watch, they are a Japanese watch brand owned by Seiko Epson, interestingly, established as an independent company all the way back in 1950. It became a subsidiary of Seiko Epson in 2009. In fact, actually, you will see Epson etched onto the back of this particular watch. And they are a fully integrated company. All their movements are in-house. It's a brand more known amongst watch enthusiasts, but have rarely come to dominate the entry level with quite competitive quality. From my experience, it has been almost better than Seiko in some parts. They produce primarily mechanical watches, self-winding, hand-winding, and all the rest of it. Quite a few quartz, a few solar as well, and radio-controlled models. But they started all the way back in post-war Japan, originally doing clocks and stuff, and then diversifying into wristwatches. One of their biggest achievements was in 1967, they actually created the world's thinnest automatic wristwatch with the day and date calendar function. Which was quite impressive. So where does the Triton fit in? Well, actually, they've released 3 versions of this watch. There's a black version and a very nice two-tone as well. This is obviously the blue bezel and blue dial. They're all exactly the same except for the color scheme, and they all come on a steel bracelet. Now, immediately, you might recall when I reviewed their far more expensive, retailing a couple of grand, the Saturation Diver. It has a remarkable resemblance to the Saturation Diver. It cannot be denied. There's a little bit of style cues from the SKX and some other watches which we'll go into in a moment. But what this represents is a new generation introduced by Orient, originally released in 2018. I was a bit slow to get on this. Unfortunately, I'm just so behind with so many watch reviews in the queue, but they've done a very clever thing, the way they've positioned themselves. They've lowered the price dramatically. Basically, they've made a more affordable version of the Saturation Diver. You know, the layout is almost exactly the same, but with a staggering amount of more refinement. In a smaller size, the size is quite comparable to the SKX, incidentally. Sorry, I just realized the bezel wasn't lined up. Little bit of play there. It is 120 click, by the way, and you get an aluminium insert. Mark, I believe, is offering a service where you can get a sapphire upgrade. Sorry, not sapphire upgrade. Ceramic bezel, that was it, sorry. But anyway, that's another whole nother story. With the saturation diver being discontinued, that's a serious bit of diving equipment. And then of course the M-Force watches being discontinued as well. They use the same caliber. It's not at the entry level. You still got the Makos and the Ray at the, a couple of hundred. This is twice as much at just shy of 400, but you get a lot more bang for your buck. So let's just go through the specifications first. The diameter is 42 millimeters. The bezel is flush with the case, so there's no overhang. The height, now it is a tall one. It's just a smidgen over 14, although the websites will say otherwise. Lug to lug, it's only 50, and hence why it still wears a bit like the SKX. Then you have 22 millimeter lug width. So it is on the large size, but very compatible with a whole number of wrists, mainly due to this very SKX case. What's interesting is instead of actual beveling, they've done a transition, a kind of faux beveling on the edge there, which really illustrates how good the polishing is. So we have brushed at the top and then a high polish mirror on the sides, drilled lug holes, which is fantastic. A very ergonomic, easy to grip, sloping bezel grip there. The bracelet, it tapers ever so slightly, brushed on the top, then on the sides, a high polish. We have a double push button deployment there with a fold over. Basic inscription there, nothing amazing to write home about. It is quite solid, I have to say. We do get micro adjustments, and flip it out there, and then you unhook it there, we have a diver's extension. It is basic, it is stamped, but I have to say, if you remember that the Seiko I reviewed not so long ago, that was priced almost 3 times as much as this. It's not as flimsy as that, so let me figure out how you get it back in there. You hook it and then snap. So yeah, it does the job. On the back we have a wonderful screwed case back, really nice heraldic engraving there with kind of almost like a pebble dash effect there with the 2 lines and the Orient shield there. I love that. It reminds me actually of the Seamaster a little bit, those kind of case backs, or even the Speedmaster with radial brushing to really accentuate that pronounced engraving. Very nice. The end links are solid. Unfortunately, these links are a little bit kind of cheapo with just pin and collar, very basic. But again, you got to remember, this is sub $400, so you can't expect heaven and earth, but at the same time, the emphasis is on things like the higher spec movement, and we get a flat sapphire glass. It does have, if I just turn it, you can see, does have anti-reflective coating on the inside, which is great because it doesn't, wear off. The bezel, which we played with earlier, 120 click. It has a little bit of wiggle, but you know what? Again, I can't knock it at the price. So let's discuss the dial, because there's a lot going on there. We have a power reserve at the 1, a slight sunburst effect. It's not the most pronounced sunburst effect. The color I would describe as a Prussian to Admiral blue. In a bright sunny environment, it really does gleam, and the sunburst effect is more exaggerated. In low light, it's not so pronounced, and it becomes a little bit more subtle. The applied markers are wonderfully substantial, really excellent loom, with a clean applied, with a mirror finish on those markers, and clearly defined shapes, so you get excellent orientation. I mean, comparable to Seiko, certainly. It lasts a long time. You've got clear, defined orientation. I love how the date is slightly cut into the little semicircle there at 4, and then again with the 1 there to make room for the power reserve that is sunken in. There's little hints of colors, red to match the Orient shield when the power reserve is running low, and that we even get loom. They didn't have to do this on the power reserve indicator. The hands are I love the hands. They're brushed and then they're blackened at the end with a nice arrow tip for the seconds. It really reaches. You get a clear indication, very precise and legible. The broad hour hand and the sword style minute hand are very easy to distinguish from one another. This kind of V shape, triangle notch just in the hour hand. There's a lot of tiny little subtle details like this throughout the watch. If I just unscrew the crown here, which is at the it's very SKX-esque here. Oh, and let's not forget that wonderfully done signed crown, bead blasted finish, and then again with the Orient. I love the Orient logo. I think it's really cool. It adds a little bit of class there with that heraldic thing. But anyway, if I pop the crown out, you'll see we do have quick set in the first position. Sorry, I got a bit excited there. We have manual wind. It is a little grainy. It's not the most refined feeling, but it's not about the feel. It's about performance, which we'll discuss in a moment. If I pull it out all the way, you can see it's hackable. But a charming little touch is if I line up the hands, we get a little rocket, which I just think is fantastic. Anyway, sorry, it doesn't it's neither here or there, but it's charming nonetheless. It threads quite nicely, and obviously with manual wind you can actually see the indicator top up. Now, I really like the addition of the power reserve. I think it does sometimes get a little bit of criticism, but for a dive watch it really makes sense, because if you're diving and you don't have a power reserve, for example, and you didn't wear it, you forgot to wind it, or it just simply did not wind enough, you're diving, you're using it for timing your dive, your safety is dependent on this, and then it stops working and it mucks up your timing. This way you can quickly glance at it and know how much juice there is in there, so you can avoid it. It's a wonderful addition to a dive watch. I think it makes perfect sense. This is part of the logic behind the design of this piece. Orient obviously wanted to make something that was compelling, that was competitive, pulled from their own portfolio, or you could say, of established designs like the Saturation Diver. There are elements of the Ray and the Mako in here as well. It's a clever move. I think they were really trying to make the best diver they could at this price, and I think they've achieved it. What have we got inside? Well, we have the caliber 40N5A, which is obviously automatic, 22 dual movement, and as you can see indicated on the power reserve there, it is a 40-hour power reserve, operates at the slower 21,600 vibrations an hour, so it is a bit slower, but of course the advantage there is less friction on the moving parts, so you're boosting the longevity of the life of the movement because there's less wear and tear. This is of course completely in-house. Orient watches make movements only for their own brand, and they are designed to be highly energy efficient. So what I mean by that is, if you compare to an ETA or the equivalent ETA, there's a higher conversion of kinetic energy than ETA, because they're actually quite simple movements. They're nothing pretty to look at, certainly, very utilitarian, but they're not there to look pretty, they're there to serve and perform. Something that is worthy of pointing out, and the shortcoming of many entry-level calibers from Seiko and Orient, is the slow date change, which is a telltale sign of a rather rudimentary, unrefined movement. But if you have a look here, if I just cycle through, it's quite snappy. It's almost instantaneous at midnight, which is a really nice touch. You don't really get to see it at this price range. If we just finish looking at the dial, automatic written in italicized, Divers 200, it is obviously a 200 meters of water resistance. You can see that the blue again has changed. It's got a really enticing grainy texture there, and just look how thick and statuesque those markers are. So the big question is, how does it wear on the wrist? Well, let's pop it on and find out. So there we go. Now I have a 6¼ inch wrist. I had to take quite a lot of links out, which does keep the weight down. It weighs a staggering 200 plus grams with the full bracelet. It is a hefty piece. I mean, it's very solid feeling, don't get me wrong. It's quite reassuring feeling, but it is, if you're not used to it, quite a chunky heavy watch certainly to wear. In fact, after a while, you really do feel it if you're not accustomed. So do keep that in mind. Certainly for the medium to larger wrist, although, you know, if you really love it and you have the smaller wrist, you can pull it off. It's not impossible. Right, let's summarize the watch. We'll start with the positives first. Undoubtedly, it's a very tempting offer. I mean, the value is there. You get a lot of bang for your buck. This is a semi-professional watch with an impressive specifications, and we are, of course, joined by the Philadelphia Police Department, so we'll just power through, as always. Performance is there. It's extremely legible. I'm getting about plus 20 seconds a week, which is remarkable considering this has not been regulated. This is, you know, straight out of the factory performance. I think the blue is definitely the most alluring of the color schemes. They got the blue spot on. It's a rich, vivid, and quite charming blue, which I really do enjoy. There's a staggering amount of embellishment from, you know, the little side crown, the case back, all the little details, the hands, etc., etc. You know, I keep having to remind myself, wow, this is $400, and I think Orient deliberately take the dominance on not only the entry level, which they've achieved with Mako and Ray, but verging on that mid-range. It literally kicks the butt of any dive watch under $1,000, and you also get a staggering amount of quality. You feel that this is a well-made piece. It's also unlike anything. It's got its own identity. It pulls from a back catalogue of watches that are from Orient, so it's refreshing to see something that's not just another Submariner. So let's discuss the negatives. Well, I really do feel it's an extremely heavy watch. It could have been a little bit thinner, could have been smaller. I would love to see, like the SKX has, the regular SKX, maybe a 38mm version, just to add an extra layer of competitiveness to the line. That would be amazing. You know, I'd certainly consider one myself. There is a lot of crown wobble, especially unscrewed. Well, only unscrewed. I mean, that would be terrible if it... But you see what I'm saying there? That makes me a little bit nervous. Unfortunately, that is a sign of a more cheaper movement. My biggest criticism is, well, you know, the name is Triton, the son of Poseidon, the god of Greek mythology. It would have been lovely to have some kind of nod to that mythological iconography, you know, like I've said this before with I forget what watch it was, but it's a missed opportunity. You know how the SKX has embraced the Kunagawa wave of Hokusei, and it's become almost emblematic of that watch, or in Seiko in general, in their dive watches. I would have loved to see, I mean, don't get me wrong, that bit of heraldry on the back is wonderful, but Triton, he was a merman technically, and he also had the trident pitchforks. You know, I would love to see Orient capitalize on that imagery. It would have just added to the charm, the same way the Hokusei classic Japanese art has added romance to the SKX. But apart from the weight, it is a cracking watch. Orient did a fantastic job with this. If you want something different, that is not your typical SKX, you know, and it is made in Japan, which is, it says on the back. Not that, you know, there's going to be a huge difference of quality, but that does mean something. You are getting a Japanese-made watch at the end of the day, so it adds to the prestige, shall we say. Anyway, gonna leave it there. Let me know your thoughts, queries, comments, opinions, all the rest of it down below. Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and found it useful. And as always, guys, I will catch you in the next one. Okay, ciao. Now, before I go, guys, I just want to quickly tell you about this extremely cool app that Watchbox have launched. This is my own personal go-to app for everything watch-related. Using the app, you can keep track of the real-time value of your watch collection. You can store watches in your digital watch box and even try on watches using an augmented reality. So don't miss out, and please go to the App Store and download it today. You can access all of my latest videos right there in the app itself. And if you haven't already, please follow me on the official Urban Gentry Instagram and of course the Facebook UGWC. But most importantly of all, keep it positive, onwards and upwards.